Right, hey guys, how we doing? Back another video from Seth the Programmer, and today we are checking out could JJK, Jujutsu Kaisen, stop Aizen from Bleach? I don't think so. Especially if we're talking, peak Aizen. Got the Hyoyoku or whatever, the yo-yo thingy bob. I don't think so. But yeah, let's just get into it.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
It's me, Seth,
Hey.
with Clyde, the
Oh.
Bleach YouTuber,
I did not know that Clyde was in this. Cool, makes sense.
and
He's big into his Bleach.
recently I've been doing videos. I've been doing videos like Goku versus Dragon Ball, and stuff like
Gojo.
that.
Goku versus Dragon Ball. Who wins?
I've also talked about and sort of hinted at, I think that, realistically speaking, the JJK verse would kind of compare here or there. But one thing I always found sort of interesting about JJK is that even though they compare Gojo to Goku and all these characters, or they want to know the Akatsuki or how Madara would handle Sukuna or whoever, one of the biggest mismatches ever that you could think of for JJK is actually a character like Aizen. Now, you've seen characters like the Espada compared to JJK and so on, but Aizen himself is an actual just Terminator threat
Like, Aizen's just such a beast. Like, he's unreal.
inside of a world just of normal humans when he comes into JJK, just due to his actual build that he has going in there. And it turns out that really no interpretation you can really manifest can actually realistically stop almost any interpretation of Aizen.
The Hogyoku, that's the one.
Unless you think, Aizen is like a hill buster after he gets like some conceptual Soul King level amp. But when you actually break it down step by step, there is no interpretation for Aizen to be defeated. And I always thought that was a very interesting concept, because it's almost as though it's a hard counter. So you say Gojo is blocking himself by manipulating space and time. Well, pretty much let's be realistic, every fodder f***ing hollow can manipulate space and time somewhat, where they teleport and open up holes in space-time.
Okay.
And then when it gets to the Espada, they're just actually just ripping through it with Gran Race arrows or casual strikes when they get to a higher level than even that. Obviously, the Gran Race arrow of base Grimjow isn't going to be stronger than a slash from Resurrection Ukiora or something like that, obviously. So, speaking of Clyde, I'm kind of curious, how you would start off this discussion and just why it's actually just such like an actual hard counter, just off at the top of your head. Like, why is it just completely illogical to even compare the verses?
Yeah, I guess to start off, like, JJK does get compared to a lot of the older shonens from, I guess, the big three, the 90s, and
It
that sort
does.
of time period. A fair bit often, I do see, videos like how would Kenpachi do in JJK, how would this character do in JJK from Naruto, whether it's
Yeah, like Broken Ronin's done,
Kakashi,
hasn't he?
Madara, etc. I do think like the higher tiers in the verse have definitely got some pretty good arguments that can be made, depending on stuff like guides or even director statements and the higher interpretations of their abilities. Like, I actually think that characters like Sukuna and Gojo are actually really OP for their verse. Like, comparatively to the rest of the cast, they're actually just in a whole different league. And then what's crazier is you could argue Sukuna is then in a league above that, which is pretty wild. In general, I guess, like what you were saying about how casually some of the lower or quote mid characters in Bleach do when it comes to replicating abilities similar to like Gojo, or even some of the higher tier characters in JJK, stuff like, I guess as an example, something like, Grimjar traps Ulquiorra into a different dimension. He just breaks out of it because he can.
He just walks out.
Can't
Yeah,
be
yeah.
trapped in there for a certain amount of...
Imagine Gojo just did that, right? Like, he's just like, I'm just going to break out of here.
Yeah, pretty much so. Like, a whole plot point in Jujutsu Kaisen is the whole let's free Gojo from the
Yeah, he gets trapped in that and he can't get out, so yeah, okay, cool.
prison realm. Someone like Ulquiorra or any of the Shinigami could genuinely just break out of it or leave, especially if they're a Shinigami. They could likely use the Senkaimon to just like open up a doorway and walk out of it.
Damn, this is so interesting. Okay.
If they can't do
Love
that, they
it.
can just like neg the realm via spiritual pressure, which Ulquiorra can do. Grimjow uses a Gran Race arrow, which actually gets blocked by Ichigo, but by just releasing the attack, when Halibal and her Fraction are viewing the battle, they watch as the atmosphere is distorted and it starts like making rippling lightning in the sky, which is wild. They're complaining because if you let off one of those attacks, a Granray Zero is basically an attack fired by the Hollows in Bleach, but more so the Espada.
Yeah, and it's like, you can't fire that here because you'll blow up all of Thingy Noches that they hang out in, isn't it? It's like
entities. Hollows can fire these red normal Zeros. They're kind of like these spiritual blasts, similar to, Key Blast from Dragon Ball or any series you've seen, like where they shoot beams like that, even Yu Yu Hakusho, etc. But the Espada being these like captain level threats, they fire a special kind of Zero called Gran Rey Zero, or the Black Zeros as we see later, like Zero Oscuras. And when they're fired, they can by accident passively destroy an area, which this has been talked about a fair bit in some of my recent videos, but the area is so large that when you see the way the anime and the manga depicts it in certain versions of the way it's shown visually, it just stretches on so far that, as far as the eye can see, essentially.
Especially when they're falling from, like, the sky and stuff, right? Like, you just
it is meant to be absolutely huge.
Of how far.
Which is why they big up the Grand Zeros not being able to use them.
I don't know if your interpretation of the actual size of it has changed. I remember back in the day, some people would compare it to like a large state in the United States, or maybe a type of smaller country. I don't know if you have like a new calculation. For
definitely. So there's some like interesting scenes like in the anime where Yami throws Rukia towards the ground, and when you see her falling, like not only does she fall like so far that it looks like she's hitting terminal velocity from the throw itself, but at the same time, it's weird because when you see behind her, it just doesn't end. It's like an endless desert. But what's funny is on the outside, though, we actually can see how big it is, at least to a degree. We can sort of like work it out with our eyes.
That looks absolutely massive. It's huge.
So inside that area, and this is just to really lay out how strong even like some of the mid-tier characters of Bleach are from one of the earlier arcs, right? These Espada are able to casually release an attack which, without the intention to do so, can passively destroy this area. They can destroy it, yeah. There's multiple pieces of evidence for this. It's got an artificial sun on the inside. It's clearly meant to be some form of a like pocket dimension realm that Aizen's created. It's very similar to Yukio the Fullbringer's ability, where he can replicate Earth and a star and heaps of other random things like that, depending on if you think it's real. Because his ability is like, it's more specifically like a video game ability, so people could always argue that it's not as authentic as what Aizen did, and that would make sense because Aizen is just objectively stronger than him, so I have no problem agreeing with that. But the thing about it is that area ties into Aizen's narrative because he basically leaves the Soul Society, goes to Hueco Mundo, makes his own legion of what you could say is like, demons to an extent, being the Espada, right? He makes a fake version of like quote-unquote heaven in Hueco Mundo, which, because there's no daytime in Hueco Mundo, so he creates one. And it's stated multiple times that the actual sun that's in the sky is a artificially made one via him. They acknowledge it is a sun. There's even a statement that says it's a sun very similar to the one in the world of the living, which is even more wild. So the inside is definitely there's some weird shenanigans going on where the outside we can actually like.
It's also wild that he put that there, and it's like one of the head guy's weakness. But anyway,
on math and work out how big it is, but that's irrelevant because the inside which they're destroying doesn't operate like that. The inside's larger than the outside, at least the outside of the castle.
Also, I want to add something else to this calculation now that I'm thinking about it. So, not only is Hueco Mundo probably larger than a country, just realistically speaking. I mean, every calculation.
Goku versus Dragon Ball.
Some arbitrary numbers were given by Ichigo and then when they're walking, right? It's obviously probably much bigger than that. Is that when we're talking about the Espada scale above these areas, so the Espada cannot launch a Gran Rey Zero. Even Aranero has one. Espada number 9, the weakest one. He has one as well. He's still not allowed to do it. It's because it would destroy Hueco Mundo, or it could destroy it or threaten it. So the thing about Las Noches is that it's not just
keep saying it.
A desert, right? It's not just the ground. It's also the encasing, right? It has its own almost horizon or its own dome.
So Las Noches is the building. Hueco Mundo is the area
within it. And so when you're warping the space-time of an attack or an area, and then you're going to destroy this country-sized area, it's almost like he's destroying not only the surface area of this country, but almost like a spherical shape. Like if a country could then become a sphere, right? It has like volume, right? It's not just like the actual just ground of it. It also has to go up and go into the sky and then destroy this sort of rock layer or this like structure, however thick it is, that also surrounds all of Las Noches as well. So this explosion is then covering that entire area. It's annihilating the ground. It's spreading throughout all of the air, probably the same amount of energy through the air, and then blowing away the dome, which is probably even larger than the surface area of the country. So it has to be just exponentially larger than we think it is. And then we're supposed to believe that JJK characters, maybe they can create an island, right? They can create a mountain.
Yeah. Whoa.
Whatever could even remotely compare to that. Even if you said that Dagon creating an island with the sea around it that goes to a horizon, that's like Aranyero level. And then all these other Espada just surpass it by dozens upon dozens upon dozens of times, to the point where just them standing near these characters makes them die. Like, it's like when Gojo walks into the disaster curses, they just explode. That's literally what they do in Bleach, but even worse, because they don't even need to walk into them. They just stand near them and they'll start dying. Then Aizen himself, while in base, he's like, Grimmjow, sit your ass down. And then Grimmjow will start basically having a seizure from just how powerful Aizen can be.
Like, oh god, I'm so sorry.
Like, Aizen's just smiling, chilling there, and he can make Grimmjow have a seizure from how powerful he is. So you get from the offset here that even the Espada might outscale most things in the series. The only thing that really stops the Espada is higher interpretations of Infinity, Hollow Purple scaling, what you think of Sukuna's World Slash, and maybe the Yuki Black Hole. The Yuki Black Hole, some people will tell me it's sort of like an 8-gate sacrifice technique. It's not a normal technique, something only she really can manifest or do. I would still argue I think Gojo should be above that technique, personally speaking. But if you do take that away, you say it's like an 8-gate sacrifice technique, even all of these Espada-type characters really should be above the cast. But it gets much worse because even Ichigo, in just his Bankai in the Soul Society arc, was going to overpower a halberd that can destroy anything in existence.
Yeah.
He takes on the Sokyoku, and then he stops it, and then Rukia says the Sokyoku will power up again when it rams him. But then we get a quantifier for this number. And we learn that Ichigo is at least, even if he's 1/32 of the power of the Sokyoku, Ichigo's busting moons. Because the Sokyoku has to be able to destroy anything in existence. It can destroy almost anything in the Soul Society.
So good.
Which is relevant to Hueco Mundo, which contains all of Las Noches. It might be a planet or whatever. So Ichigo in his Bankai is 1/32 of a device that can possibly destroy, even if it is a planet. It might be talking about a type of pocket universe or its own separate dimension with stars in it. But if it's just talking about even a planet, Ichigo's already reaching moon levels or higher in just his Bankai state. And then he gets a mask, which is another Bankai level amp.
Yeah.
And then Grimmjow and these other characters just absolutely annihilate him. And then there's just these orders of magnitude that keep stacking upon each other over and over and over again until you reach just base Aizen. And then you realize you need this Yuki Black Hole feat to even compete with Aizen at all. Or else it's not even a discussion whatsoever. The characters can't even hurt him. And even Gojo manipulating space or time with blue, red, or purple, we learn realistically that Hollow Purple is basically just a terrible version of what Aizen could already do. Kurohitsugi. So it's just a terrible version of Kurohitsugi because his ability just kills basically island-level fodder the entire series that would get destroyed by one tap of Aranyero in base form. But here's Aizen. He can create a Kurohitsugi and destroy almost everyone in the verse.
Oh, the Black Coffin, right? Yeah.
Possibly moon level through planet level, just realistically speaking off the Sokyoku. And so what does a character like Gojo even have going for him, or a character like Sukuna even have going for him against these types of characters? The rest of the verse is basically just irrelevant. Even Yuki's Black Hole, let's say Yuki Black Hole's Aizen's like, see ya, bitch, and he just Nagashiyans, or he goes to a different dimension. Even if you want to argue that's stronger than him, and Clyde and I are probably going to get into it, but even that's probably not strong enough to actually do anything to him. But I'll let you go. I've kind of ranted for a while.
There's some interesting stuff to add towards the scaling too. I guess we could have started a lot earlier in Bleach to give more perspective, but I guess once you hit someone like a Grimmjow that some people wouldn't think straight away is like a good comparable opponent for throwing into a whole different verse like Jujutsu Kaisen. But part of the thing with destroying Las Noches too, if you destroy the inside out, which is what is stated to be able to be done by those who are ranked 4 and above with the mere transformation of Resurrection, but a Gran Rey Zero from every Espada. The thing that's interesting is you'd also be destroying that replica sun. So if you think it's like the size of a real one, and it is comparable to the one in the world of the living as it's stated, Now, that would be consistent with some stuff from the novels where apparently Grimmjow attempted or did destroy his son. I don't recall exactly verbatim what was stated, but there is a feat where he does essentially clash with the concept of destroying the sun. And some people still argue that Grimmjow was weaker than some of the top tier of Sparta. I don't know how you guys in the comments feel about that, but whether or not you do or don't, it doesn't necessarily change the argument. It's more like a consistency of, these characters are passively destroying pretty damn big areas. Very early in the series, if you interpret Bleach as having FTL Zeros, especially very early, you've got like the weakest iteration of Shinigami Ichigo, block him at point blank range and then returning a slash back towards the Menos Grande. Then later on, characters become tens and tens and tens of times faster via transformations, Balas, which have a statement that they're 20 times faster than a Zero, which is wild. So speed-wise, pretty crazy stuff if you interpret it as FTL. When it comes to damage in general, it's pretty wild. I mean, some quick debunk on the mountain stuff because it does get misinterpreted quite a bit. The thing that Aizen was hyping up when he was viewing that Clash of Blades with Ichigo was more like, wow, I didn't realize that passively I could just like eviscerate it from existence, because it's not like it was...
Yeah, it's like, it feels like he didn't even make an effort to do that and it happened. He's like, huh.
It's an explosion or like a clash of the blade hitting the mountain. It's more like by us just clashing our blades together, we're making stuff vanish. So that's more the emphasis.
Right, they're eradicating things like far in the distance, like out of existence, like just by clashing their swords, right?
Yeah, and you're like, I didn't even realize I could do that. It's pretty cool.
Not destruction. Like what he's emphasizing, and I'm sure it's more nuanced in the original Japanese kanji.
Oh, I have a great example. It's sort of like how in Dragon Ball, they're like, they watch Beerus or someone, they're like, this is Hawkeye, and he'll blow up a rock, right? And then they're like, whoa, right, that's Hawkeye, right? It's like, it's the way that it's destroyed that impresses the character. So it's sort of like they're doing the
it's like, you've raised it
Hawkeye on this mountain.
Yeah, it's not like he's blasted it with an energy blast. It's like he's just made it go. It's like, wow.
Exactly.
Like anyone can blow up the rock, but not everyone can make the rock just disappear.
It's a lot more of a nuanced scene than just like, mountain feat, therefore impressive, because it would be a contradiction with the scaling in the series, because we know that someone like Grimmjow, who the Aizen, which was previously shown a much weaker iteration of him, could just kill him with his spiritual pressure if he wanted to. It's, there's like multiple statements that Aizen is just above the Espada. Like, this is not even really like a controversial thing to say at all, but it's like, if you think that that's where Aizen caps off, hypothetically, then you're basically just agreeing that Grimmjow's got more firepower than him because of the Gonrei Zero feat, so it just makes no sense. Hopefully that can like quickly debunk that, because that's just absolutely irrelevant to any sort of modern day Bleach interpretation of the series.
I think most people would consider it a meme, but yeah, I think there are some people that will be like...
Apologies. So I've been waiting for a parcel to arrive for the last 3 days, and the delivery service that's been bringing it has been messing me about with their service, and they've finally given me an actual time today that it's arriving, so I'm just checking. I should have enough time. Yeah, we're good.
Wow,
good.
he's hyping
we're
up
good.
this mountain. They just won't understand.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think that kind of going into it further, because we're sort of building up, right? We're building up. The problem with Aizen is that it keeps going, right? So this is just like this is the flat level. We're basically talking about the start of the Urankar arc in terms of characters, and that might be enough to solo JJK. But Aizen goes higher. So realistically speaking, Aizen, even before the Hokyoku, is somewhat able to fight Yamamoto. Somewhat.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not you think Yamamoto's stronger than Aizen, or you think Aizen's stronger, not really too
It's fine, because they still can fight each other on a kind of like,
I personally believe Yamamoto is stronger, so I'm saying this more unbiased, I guess. But Aizen, in his own words, says if we went toe-to-toe, you would probably
win, yeah.
And that's not the words of someone that's like, oh, if we went toe-to-toe, you would no-diff me. Right? Like, that's clearly not what Aizen's
probably
saying.
win.
And we learned from recent interviews that Aizen is more knowledgeable about the top tiers of this verse, ancient or not, than we all really thought. He was aware of Unohana. He knew Unohana's power from back in the day, and he knew he could take her, but he knew how much energy it might take to fight her, and that it might be a waste, or he might be caught lacking later or something like that. So he's aware of like these top tiers powers, and he says you would probably win, implying there's even a chance he might win against Yamamoto. But the thing about Yamamoto is that Yamamoto is one of those characters who we talked about someone's existence or aura, crushing one of these like Espada, Yamamoto's aura is basically negging the realm, literally. Like, his aura is going to destroy the Soul Society, and the Soul Society is more of a concept in the sense, not literally a concept, but more so a concept in the sense that it's not just a planet, but that it's a location, right? And so while what the Soul Society is debatable, you know, some people will debate, oh, it's a planet, you know, obviously, you know, there's obviously an atmosphere above that that would still be in the Soul Society. Are the stars within it still in the Soul Society, or blah, blah, blah? That's where it gets a little bit more debatable. Now, Clyde, I'm sure you have your own perspective on this, but I'm actually curious, you know, what do you actually think about this Yamamoto statement when he says, you know, his presence is going to destroy the Soul Society? Because we later learned Squad Zero, I'm going to be real with you guys, I think Yamamoto destroys Senjumaru and a lot of these other characters, but that's for a different topic. I'm sure Clyde will talk about that on his channel one day. But
someday, I hope Clyde makes a video sometime.
These characters are basically causing an earthquake between 3 realms that are disconnected by space and time, just by appearing. And so Yamamoto clearly is doing the same thing, where he's having a very condensed, intense effect on this one realm in particular, and he's going to threaten to destroy it. So I'm curious what you think what that realm could entail with, like.
Well, I guess like this is a topic that shouldn't be super like controversial, but the reality is that Yamamoto is a 1v1 threat to Yuha. Uryu is shown narratively to be a comparative threat to Senjumaru. I don't think there's anything controversial when the novels still regard Yamamoto and Aizen to be like these two somewhat comparable threats in the sense of their spiritual pressure still being a reference of power. I think, you know, what Seth said is 100% accurate and stuff. I know people would probably be like, why would they show Yamamoto then a more impressive feat later? Like, why isn't Yamamoto passively doing the same thing? And it's like, well, we actually know Yamamoto was restricting his power, so we don't really 100% know what he could do if he was to just go full unleash mode on his flames.
He's a way better, way wiser, has way more mastery over his ability than Senjumaru. Like, let's be 100% honest. It's like when Goku gets his god powers, he's punching away the universe on accident. It's like, but Beerus isn't the one doing that necessarily. It's like, because Beerus is just a better fighter. He's just more experienced with it. So that's what I'd say personally.
I guess without us like spending too much time on that too, because eventually we do see that a captain being weaker than Yamamoto, and Shunsui does actually battle an opponent which is narratively above the Zero Division member. So I don't think it's that controversial. However, as for like what the realm itself that's being affected is, again, like Yamamoto is holding back, which is really good for him because it shows that this is a passive thing, which even scares Unohana. You know, those two have a lot of statements where they're regarded as the 2 strongest Shinigami. They have a lot of narrative stuff, which equates them to being like some of the most dangerous individuals in general that are Shinigami. So I'm of the direct belief, and I think it's shown enough to believe this, that the Soul Society is on a world which is similar to the world of the living. So they're on a planet. It's got a day and night cycle with a moon and a sun and stars in the atmosphere. So it's very clear that that's what it is. Now, as Seth said, so there's some interesting wording about the Soul Society, because there's obviously like the Soul Society, which is the visual representation that we see. Like, we know what it visually is, just like we know what, you know, New York City is, right? So there's a clear thing that we're looking at. But I think when people say the Soul Society, and especially the way the series explains it, they're also talking about just that whole realm. So when I go to the Soul Society, I'm going to the planet that it's on, but that basically encapsulates the whole universe within that realm. Right. I think that's fine to say that too. I mean, the Sokyoku has the universal overpower statements. It's like it can overwhelm everything in existence with its spiritual pressure. It is some pretty flowery language, but I think it's consistent, especially based on what the Zero Division do. I think a big thing that people don't like think about with the Zero Division feat too is that people will say, oh, they're only shaking the 3 planets, quote unquote. Now, Hueco Mundo is a little bit debatable. I think that's more of a flat plane with infinite sand. It's described that way a lot in different source material. It's definitely a lot different to the world of the living and the Soul Society, especially because it doesn't seem to have a day cycle ever, hence why Los Noches is what it is, because of Aizen. So basically, you got to think about this, and people don't say this enough, right? If you want to cap it to, it's just the 3 planets getting shaken, well, that's still fine, because for Senjumaru's attack or spiritual pressure to travel from the Soul Palace, which is a separate dimension, it has to actually travel a universal distance to touch those areas, because it's going from one realm to the other. So there's definitely some more in-depth science which could be, explained upon here that I could go far more in depth with. But for a layman way to say it, it's pretty crazy because it's just verbatim stated what they're doing. The kanji doesn't cap out at just like sekai, like she specifies specifically the heaven and earth, and obviously back in the day when people would say like the heavens, they would refer to pretty much everything beyond the atmosphere or everything around the planet. The wording's pretty direct, but that being said, Yamamoto and characters like Aizen, they hit levels eventually where like they're on that same level anyway. It's pretty clear that if people think that someone like a Unohana could be a threat to even a singular member of the Zero Division, then we know that, Kubo in his own view, based on that recent Q&A, he thinks that Aizen, like narratively, is someone that could battle Unohana. He pretty much doesn't pay her any mind when she's in Karakura Town. He's only focused on Yamamoto.
Yeah.
We know that one of the reasons that he goes so hard to transform with the Hogyoku is to reach a state where he could invade the Soul Palace. There are the multiple versions of Aizen. So Captain Aizen, he actually has a statement where he says that when he summons the Kurohitsugi on Sokyoku Hill against Komamura, he could only summon like a third of its full power. Aizen then becomes stronger while trying to, subdue the Hogyoku, and then we see him in his, his white like outfit, the sort of clothing he wears along with the Espada. In Karakura Town, we have that one who becomes even stronger. He believes that in a battle to the death, he would have a chance against Yamamoto. He does make contingency plans to avoid that, as
he always does.
In his situation, but it's pretty clear that Aizen is still really strong. He's got statements like double the strength of a captain.
His spiritual pressure is so insane that someone with death hacks and literal senescence time, basically a time warp ability where he warps the senescence in the time of your body into dying, he gains hacks resistance to that because he's so powerful. So you can just ignore senescence or like time
that's
warp.
mental.
He can ignore space-time warping. Characters that would try to warp him away, doesn't work. He might have BFR resistance. They can't just throw him in a cube and just defeat him. So he has so many resistances on top of this. But then he goes into his chrysalis. He then goes into his transform state. And that's where it becomes a total mismatch, just complete a mismatch. Because he
I really like this form.
So immortal that erasing him from existence doesn't cause him to die. And Clyde, you might argue that he might have a conceptual level of existence erasure, so like he might not even be able to be erased by someone who can manipulate a concept.
So I guess like
that is insane. Like how'd you
before we even touch stuff like Kyokusui Getsu and all of his other really annoying abilities, so one of the craziest things he does in a very weak transformation of the Hogyoku, this is one of the first like weird transformations he goes into. He basically glances at this being called the Cleaner, which is basically like it forces Shinigami to get out of they travel through like this wormhole thing.
Yeah,
it's
and I like
meant
make
to
sure
force
it's
people to hurry
empty.
up and get out of it and not stay there too long because time inside is different from outside. And anyway, Aizen basically, transforms the Hogyoku. He enters it with Gin. Gin's like, "Yo, we gotta be quick here because the Cleaner's coming." And Aizen's like, "Nah, I'm just gonna like glance at it and kill it."
Yeah.
And just blows it away with one glance of his eyes. That thing is said to govern time and space, like
which
it's
so
got
oh my
those two
god.
things, which is pretty cool.
So when you take that into consideration, Jesus fucking Christ, Aizen's insane.
There's more wording, which is
that's a good terminology. Authority over time and space. That is something we would have. It governs that.
So then there's more wording, like basically the concept of reason itself doesn't apply to Aizen, and I think the reason, ironically, the reason that's being said in the manga is because Aizen is going to then face a threat like Ichibei, and he is someone that controls the concept of names, and he himself has actually authority over the color black, which is really wild. Like just the concept of black itself, like he has all power over that. Like he can steal the nighttime from future day and nights, which is really wild. Obviously, this kind of stuff is very, very like it's very complicated for the average Joe to understand, but pretty much like we're getting beyond like who can move faster and hit harder, and that's what Aizen is doing passively. Like he gets to a stage where he not only becomes like what you would consider sort of enlightened and transcendent, especially with his spiritual pressure, but he's like just looking at beings like the Cleaner and he just makes them vanish. Again, he was meant to fight Ichibei, pretty wild, but even just like the prior stuff with like Captain Aizen from the Soul Society and Karakura Town Aizen, because of the way he retroactively is above characters like all the Espada with just spiritual pressure alone, he's already got like crazy destruction, speed capability, I mean, he's already a menace there, but if we get further and further into like the transformed Aizens and
That's
what
such a cool
those
form.
ones mean with their powers, or even the one from the War Arc, it just gets worse and worse how much stronger he is than the entire verse. Like,
I mean, imagine a Mahoraga that even after Sukuna hit him with Fuga, he just regenerates anyway. Like he would just like come back from Fuga and then adapt to his Fuga.
Yep.
Like that's pretty much what like Aizen start to do. It's to the point, man. Like I'm not even gonna joke around. Like even if you argued like Hollow Purple would just like blow a hole in him like Toji, who cares? You know, he could hit him with like 20 Hollow Purples to the point where he doesn't have a body and he would still come back. It's to the point where when he's strapped in the psych ward, Ichibei can throw
The
goop
psych
on him,
ward.
remove his name, and then erase him from existence, and he'd come back to life.
Damn.
So it's like there is nothing that Jujutsu Kaisen can really do. The only thing you could really argue is like maybe a hacks like Unlimited Void or something like that. You try to argue Unlimited Void. Now the problem with Unlimited Void is we learned this in the anime is that it's not instant, so it can actually be reacted to and dodged. Now Clyde has many videos on Bleach scaling. I do recommend those.
Oh
but
yeah, he
basically,
does.
Based on what we know from Clyde's videos.
What I've learned in the comments section recently is that a lot that he's deleted, I still have reaction videos to on my channel, so if you want to see some Clyde videos that don't exist anymore, they're somewhere on here. I haven't got them in a playlist.
The Gashion, the Saros, even the Ashvalen Light. Even if you say Ashvalen Light is bare minimum light speed, there's like fodder characters that can react to Ashvalen Light, which comes from another dimension down to the planet almost instantly. So it is light speed, even probably in a calc, let alone its nature. Aizen's just massively faster than light based on that. At best, you might be able to get an MFTL, Sukuna, or like Gojo from Kashimo at best. But realistically speaking, it does seem like Aizen could react to Infinite Void, as well as ignore and avoid Infinite Void. He can not be trapped in a barrier or a time space. He can just leave it at will. He can ignore things that govern these concepts or these things. As well as the fact that Aizen's hacks works on the entire story. So the second Gojo looks at Aizen, he's hit with Kyoka Suigetsu. And so the reason that we do know that it would work through his infinity is because Clyde, this is something Clyde really pointed out, is that Gojo basically gets Genjutsu'd at the start of JJK. So you should go into detail about that. And obviously Aizen's is just like a spiritual god version of what already worked on him. But yeah.
So pretty much like at the very start of Jujutsu Kaisen, Hanami is able to land like this weird flower mind control technique on Gojo, and he's like not even really aware he's under it. So it's pretty clear proof that he's not like immune to things like that. Kyoka Suigetsu is just that on steroids, TRT,
Definitely,
and everything you could probably get your hands on. Like, it's
right.
just,
so as soon as he glances the sword, he's just done. Right? Yeah.
Way better. Like, he'd be cooked if he gets touched by Kyoka Suigetsu. Now, depending on the variant of Aizen, it's either the one where he just whips out his sword and he's under it. Gojo's going to have no prior knowledge on how that works. The difference in those two techniques being cast is that within character, one's drawing his blade, so Gojo has no suspicion to assume something like that's going to happen, whereas with Aizen facing Gojo, there's going to be like a situation where he has to do the hand signs, do the whole domain expansion, etc. So there's like a couple of steps needed for that to happen, whereas the blade, it's like, he's under it. And then with future versions of Aizen, he becomes one with his blade, so the second you look at basically any part of his body, you're under it because he's an extension of his blade.
Yeah.
As shown by Dongai Ichigo and actually even Renji in the latest episode of Bleach, when you become more intertwined and one with your Asuchi or Zanpakuto, it can be sort of summoned via your body, and Renji does something like that during his final attack, which is really cool. So it's pretty clear that like that's an extension of that, especially via the the jail scene.
And it's all energy, like it's all working on like a spiritual, beyond existence type flow that it even ignores time and space at that level. Where it's just like, how do these characters ignore Aizen's Kyoka? Like, how is there any way to even prove that? How would the Limitless even recognize Kyoka Suigetsu as a threat? Like, how would Gojo even recognize it as a threat to stop it? Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. Right?
It's incomprehensible, isn't it? Like, you don't even know that you're under it. Like, you can't even understand it to get out of it. Like, you don't know. You can even be told you're under it, and it's like, well, I don't get
It
it.
even automatically doesn't make any sense, really. And I'll be honest, I think there's ways to even make Aizen even stronger, realistically. I mean, he's a threat. He's a threat to Yuha. He's a threat to Ichigo. He's a threat to Yuha. Now, Yuha is obviously stronger than Ichigo, beats him down with hacks and whatever, but Yuha clearly doesn't like Ichigo's Bankai, okay? And Aizen is still a threat to Ichigo. They're clearly like in some type of similar magnitude of power. Yuha absorbed the Soul King and was going to destroy everything. Everything might include the Garganta, or the outer space, around all of the three realms. He might be talking about a lot more than just the three realms. You have to remember, in Memories of Nobody, which is a movie that got confirmed basically canon.
I mean, it makes sense to be as well, because everyone's memories get erased, and there were, in the anime, I'm sure there was a clip that made this fit in as well. Great movie as well, absolutely fantastic. Oh, and the abridged movie's great.
Canonized by the anime, and was sort of implied canonized in the manga.
Yeah, there's a thing at the end of the chapter where Kubo pretty much directs the audience to go and watch the movie. Like, it's a little sketch at the end, so it's
yeah. And in that movie, there's a character that absorbs these infinite blank souls and is going to basically destroy or cause the collapse or the creation of these dimensions that have stars and planets, and to the point where it would cause like almost solar systems levels of energy from this weird pocket fodder dimension, let alone these intentional dimensions where the majority of souls are generated and created and focused by the Soul King, and then the outer space beyond that. I'm being realistic. Even like the wanked like black hole Yuki Gojo, it just doesn't do anything to any of these characters. Just realistically speaking, in terms of power, the hacks doesn't stop Aizen. They have no way to put him down for good. He can just toy with them. Realistically, I mean, I don't even think that they would get through like his aura. Like, I think they would try to touch him and their bodies would disintegrate. I think Sukuna would try to throw some slashes at him, and I think.
Imagine Gojo thinking that he could just walk up to him with his whole like limitless stuff, and then just it backfiring.
It would disintegrate in his aura. I don't think he actually has the power to do that. I think even his World Slash might just get disintegrated. I mean, realistically, why is the World Slash better than anything that just chops through time, space, or ignores distance that he's already basically dealt with? I mean, it doesn't really seem like anything above his pay grade, but I don't know. That's all I really have to say about it. But
I would say, like, I have some lines in front of me of sort of points to make about JJK, because I guess it's like, we don't mean to shit on JJK. It's more like this was a topic that was, asked from our connected audience that were like, how would Aizen actually do in JJK? I feel like when people do cover this topic, they don't really like cover it correctly. So I would say stuff like off the dome, which should be addressed as things like, all right, we take Sukuna, for example, right? He faces off with Aizen. He's like, all right, I can't see this dude. He's clearly using some sort of hypnosis technique. Where is he? Activates domain expansion, starts spamming slashes everywhere like he does against Maharaga. Let's imagine he's doing that and Aizen's just like standing there or floating there. The thing about Aizen is that these slashes have finite cutting ability. Like, we know that they actually can be tanked to some degree. The world slash is a little bit different.
You can take them
we'll get into
if
that.
you... Yeah.
Maki, Yuji, and a few characters have been shown to survive these blows. We know that within their realm of capability, like what they can take or what they can dish out, Aizen could not only tank them with how durable he is with his spiritual pressure around his body and just physical strength in general, but he is so much faster than these guys that he could replicate the Bankai Ichigo feat against Byakuya, where he could actually just parry every single slash. Like, he's so much faster than Sukuna realistically, and it does depend on interpretation on how fast you think Bleach characters are. I don't think it's controversial to say they're FTL.
JJK got blitzed by lightning.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
So, like, everyone in JJK...
Exactly. They're like, oh my god, I touched lightning, and and then it's like, wow, okay, cool. You take, like, Bleach, and it's just, like, faster than light.
It's just a lightning except for, like, 3 guys.
It works It works both ways in this instance. We can either downplay both series, which would still have Bleach superior anyway, or we could just upscale both and talk about why, it works back and forth, but...
More fun to upscale.
Aizen would generally just, like, with a casual, flick of his hand, he would block every single slash, if he wanted to, that is, because he has other ways to kill Sukuna, but, even him doing that as, like, a last-ditch sort of, like, all right, I can't see him, I don't know where he is, I'm going to just, like, destroy the area. He's got nothing in his arsenal potent enough to harm Aizen, whether it's the, evolved version of the domain expansion, his Fuga arrow, the slashes, none of it would work. Aizen's Kurohitsugi, like, gets to a stage later in the story where the way it's described is pretty much just verbatim a black hole. Like, it's going to bend time and space and crush Ichigo to the very atoms itself.
Like he's almost creating like a singularity in a box or something.
Yeah,
It's
that's
strange.
and yeah, he believes that's enough to take out Ichigo, and it doesn't work. The characters in the past survived weaker versions of the Kurohitsuki, and it's like, bro, that's just a casual technique you can whip out in combat. So he has stuff like that up his arsenal. He has a barrier behind his neck, which he puts there for defense, because he claims it's like the most vital point of any being is right behind the neck or behind the head, which does make sense. So he places this like keto barrier there, and there's a statement in one of the data books that states there is like a really crazy amount of layers of that seal behind his
Aizen's million escudo, the barrier he put behind his neck, is, as the name implies, made up of 1 million escudo barriers. Jesus Christ.
neck, and it's like each individual layer would be able to parry pretty much any blow from any character in Jujutsu Kaisen. So he has that. Aizen's aura again would just make every character in JJK either disintegrate and vanish in front of him or fall to the ground and die. I mean, when Yamamoto used his spiritual pressure against Nanao, like basically she started foaming from the mouth and like almost dying, like just from being near him. So that's pretty crazy. And he wasn't even intending.
When people got near Aizen, they would be eradicated from existence. Like, just being generally near him. Like, and he wasn't trying to, like, you could say with Yamamoto, he was like flexing so they could kill, like, or that he could like, basically tame her, sort of like what Aizen did to Grimmjow. But it got to a point where Aizen was so powerful that even without flexing his energy, people would get eradicated from existence just being in town. Even Gin touching him, and Gin, I've argued in my captain ranking video, he's a War Arc level threat. I do think so. I think he'd be relevant in the War Arc. I think him versus Shunsui is a debate to have, actually. But he touches Aizen, and it erases parts of his hand from existence that touched part of him on accident or got too close to him. So even then, like without even trying, Aizen is erasing characters from existence just by
cash, no diff,
the
bro.
game one is
You're
good
gone.
Too, because, people, not a lot of people, but I've seen enough, to make it a reference. Some people will say like, oh, it only works against weaker characters, but Gin tried stealing the Hogyoku from Aizen's body after he like does the off guard slash and blows his body apart, whatever. He goes to grab the Hogyoku, and part of his arm is missing when he just goes near the vicinity of him. So it's like wow, that's even happening to someone like Gin, which is really crazy to see. And then Aizen becomes stronger than that. Like he transforms right afterwards, transforms again when he fights Ichigo, becomes even stronger when he's in the chair, according to Urahara and some other characters that view him. So that's really wild, because obviously like anything he can do to Gin or do to these characters below him just gives him like passive upscaling, which is really wild. The Hogyoku also, which is really interesting, as Seth mentioned earlier, it pretty much does make him like a more exaggerated version of the Maharaga. Now, the Maharaga is impressive. Like the thing with it is that when it spawns in, it's quite slow and weak. That's its only sort of downside, is that it's not very strong when it first appears. But it does have this ability where it basically can adapt to concepts. It doesn't just adapt to like, oh, it's immune to fire now. Like it will literally adapt to like the conceptual process.
Infinitely
Everything.
Yeah. Like, so one thing that does happen in the Sukuna fight is that he doesn't just become like, oh, now he's got, iron skin so he can block the slashes. He starts actually adapting to the very concept of a cut, like the cleave itself and the slash. And that's what makes it really wild, because Sukuna realizes he starts hitting it with more and he's like, whoa, I felt weird when it landed. What's going on? It just becomes immune to it, which is really wild. And then eventually it can become immune to stuff like even water. Like it gets submerged in water, grows gills instantly. When Sukuna uses his Fuga arrow, he makes sure to one-tap it with that technique, because you have to kill it with the first strike of an attack, otherwise it adapts just like Doomsday. I mean, it sort of looks like Doomsday too. It's clear where the inspiration's from, but...
Anime Doomsday.
Yeah. That being said, Aizen is pretty much the same in that regard. Not the whole conceptual thing, at least within reason, right? But he is able to pretty much like will anything into existence, so... He could theoretically, like, if he willed it really hard, he could be like, oh, I want to be immune to fire forever, and then maybe the Hogyoku would actually grant him that. It is part of...
Well, here's something interesting about the Hogyoku is that... So Aizen is the master of the Hogyoku, right? So, there was a debate with Ichigo and Urahara if he was or not, but we learned that he is, and he lost basically subconsciously on purpose, right? So the Hogyoku grants his wish or whatever. But the Hogyoku was shown before that, and so all of Ichigo's friends basically... get their powers because of the Hogyoku. Because they, like, Chad's like, I want to be useful, I want to fight, like, you know, I want to punch guys, and Orihime's like, I want to be useful, like, I want to heal people, I want to do whatever. And so it was almost like the Hogyoku granted them and manifested reality for them to be able to do this. So the Hogyoku almost like manifests this ability to reject the concept of phenomena happening to Orihime passively. And she's not even the master of it.
The wording like that is good too, because even if you were to say hypothetically, right, all it did was turn on powers they passively had, the fact is it has the capability to do that. And we know based on the way that Aizen attains this form of immortality that surpasses the idea of being, you know, not only conceptually erased, but erased in general from a being which, from his perspective, now, hear me out on this, right? So, you don't have to interpret the pages as actual dimensional scaling, but the thing that Aizen does explain is that from his perspective as a hyper genius, you know, 500-year-old being, he pretty much states, he's like, yo, he seems like he's on a different dimensional plane of power than me. So, irregardless of the dimensional scaling, let's just say it doesn't do that for a moment. That's his descriptive explanation for how strong Ichigo is compared to him. He then gets hit by the attack, right? Which is even stronger than that, because he actually said that about...
An attack he can't even comprehend.
Yes.
It just hits him in the face.
He basically, the way the manga, like, explains it, because there's a very specific piece of dialogue where he says, this whole time I haven't been able to sense Ichigo, and he's talking about Dongai Ichigo. He then goes into the Mugetsu, right? And that thing's on just a whole different level. And again, he's just in shock that it even exists. It hits him directly, right? Doesn't miss. Makes his whole body vanish, and then he just reappears. Like, he just cannot be killed by a being which, in his own words, is on a different dimensional plane of power to him.
And then Ichigo's like, I think he lost on purpose.
Yeah.
So Aizen is just like, the fact he can get hit by something that's like in his mind, just transcendent to his very being, and then he could still probably pull off a win.
It's very lucky for the good guys of Bleach that what had happened was that earlier, when he was much weaker, Urahara had planted like a seal on him, which was going to release if he was to basically have his powers lower to a point where it could take over, because in his own words on the page, he does state that he's going to transform again, but he's interrupted by the Kido seal going off. So it was just bad timing. On top of that too, he also did, as Seth said, he did actually mentally concede to the battle. He's like, whatever, I've been defeated. I actually, you know, he did want to lose. Like, he secretly wanted someone to beat him. I think it was also, in a sense, like, he wanted a very particular kind of enemy to beat him too, because some would say, well, why wouldn't he just battle Yamamoto if that's the case? But it's very clear that there was a narrative thing going on there between him and Ichigo, hence why his attitude is so much different when he reappears. But that being said, he just can't even be killed. Like,
he wanted someone who had like a soul like him, you know, it's more like spiritually like him. Like Ichigo, there's like these side novels where, you know, Ichigo's trying to kind of breaking down how he can think like Aizen, how he feels like Aizen. He's like, Ichigo always felt like he was could just do things better than people, and then when Tatsuki could beat him up at video games, he kind of like respected that and acknowledged that. And he's like, I could feel how Aizen wanted someone who was more familiar or like spiritually akin to him. He wanted more kin like him. And so Ichigo, who's this hyper prodigy, and it's considered that Aizen is a hyper prodigy as well. Like, some people would argue, basically from the day Aizen was born and he could realize who he was, he realized he was just next level in terms of what he could accomplish. And so Ichigo just was someone who was kind of born like Aizen, in the sense that he was born for this intense level of power and ability, and that he only wanted to find a rival like that. And Yamamoto was stronger, but it's because he's like a 3,000 trillion year old head.
He's a heck of a lot older.
Sits next to his sword and trains all day next to it, not necessarily because he's like a hyper destined prodigy or, you know, threat, or has all these abilities from birth, or is sort of set apart and alienated from the others like Aizen was. Yamamoto really had to kind of train and grind for that, whereas Ichigo and Aizen are a little bit more akin in that regard, I guess.
Yeah, I guess there's also like a sort of narrative thing going on there where if you look at Aizen and Ichigo, so Aizen is trying to attain all these weird powers and become this like weird formed entity, whereas Ichigo was kind of born as a hybrid already. So there's like some very like odd things going on there. Like, for example, actually, when Aizen starts to revert character-wise, he basically transforms into this alien-looking form. But if you pay attention to the form, the blade is fused with his arm, very similar to the original form of White, and he actually grows long hair and a hollow-type face in the same way. And his obsession with Ichigo was that he had seen that initial hollow hybrid thing that he made. And he was like, you know what? Let's see what happens when it mixes with a Quincy. So when he realized it had been passed on to Ichigo, as he claims he knew about Ichigo since he was born, he knew about Masaki, etc. It seems like his character in some sort of like, you know, meta extra narrative, like he like reverted physically, like passively without even realizing, because it was willed through the Hogyoku. So there's a lot of stuff going on with their dynamic. And that being said too, just going back to the immortality, it's like, it's not even just like, oh, he can just regen an arm or a leg or something like that, or, you know, heal a cut on his body. It's like his whole body can be removed from existence and he can come back. Like, it's crazy too, because we know earlier in the series, like even one of the earlier Kitos, I believe it's called Heian or Hien or something like that, ironically similar to the Sukuna word, but Tosin uses it to get rid of Grimjow's arm. And it's described to be a Keto or Hado or Keto. I don't recall exactly what it is, but
I think it was Hado 54 or something like that.
Yeah, basically, it's stated it actually existence erases whatever it hits, and it's similar to Quincy arrows. One of the problems with Quincy arrows is that when they kill hollows, they don't cleanse them. It actually just removes them from existence.
Just gone,
so, you know, you got to realize that the Mugetsu is just far, far beyond like that level of potency, and this, you know, still he comes back. I mean, at the end of the series, like Yuha absorbs Aizen, and he still comes back. Like he's just unkillable, and it's pretty wild. Like there's a lot more.
He got absorbed, like he got like Super Boo absorbed, and still somehow.
And then just like
boop,
no thank you.
Really
he I mean, Yuha even said he's like, the idea of trying to kill you would just be like next to impossible. I can't even be bothered with this. I'd rather just come and speak to you and see if you'll join me. So like even he knows back then he's like, this dude's just ridiculous. So. Yeah, Aizen's immortality, it's not normal. It's very much like...
No, it's very much not.
Conceptually based.
Not normal.
And he's just, you know, he just passively gets stronger while sitting in a chair.
You need like a powerful seal, but neither Gojo or Sukuna ever really do that. At best, you'd say Kenjaku, but Kenjaku's gonna die from his aura, man. Like, if Gin is dying from his aura, like, there's just no fathomable way Kenjaku's getting close to this guy at all. If Kenjaku could even register his existence. Like, it's just not even... It's not possible. In terms of like this whole narrative talk we're going over, Gojo himself, in the words of Gege, or the opinion of Gege, it seems like Gege doesn't even think Gojo's like Kakashi level. So as someone who scales Naruto, it depends what Kakashi's talking about. If it's DMS Kakashi, that might make more sense. You could argue that Aizen could be up there with end of series Naruto characters. That's obviously a big video.
That's an interesting one to mention because it's so random. Because the next one I want to check out, the next video I want to check out, which is JJK related. Oh, actually, no. It's on the list though. I want to do Mahito versus the Culling Games, and then 6 has got Kakashi would likely beat Gojo, and we got it being mentioned here.
That's like Clyde and I are working on, but don't want to get too much into that. But if you think that in Gege's mind, he's just thinking about the normal Kakashi. Like the one that we see in the War Arc, you know, the one Sharingan Kakashi, the one you'd see most of the time, and not just like, you know, the Kakashi we saw for like 0.2 seconds, and it's an ability he doesn't have all the time.
Became the most powerful character in Naruto.
Clearly not normal Kakashi, it's like an amped Kakashi. That Kakashi's like what, like multi-continental, he has an ability where he can like warp through space-time. I argued, you know, he could Kamui through infinity, still believe that. Possibly MFTL scaling through like KCM, but even then, that's kind of iffy because of some Haku stuff. Maybe Lightspeed. Because of the scaling of the Raikage. And that's enough for Gege to be like, yeah, he might take down Gojo. Only way it doesn't matter is if it's like Boruto Kakashi. I don't know if Gege watches Boruto. Well, you know, that Kakashi can fight like Kashi and Koji, and he's going to do some crazy stuff later. But, you know, if he's referring to like this War Arc Kakashi, you know, it's sort of like if War Arc Kakashi's not beating Transcendent Aizen who can fight Yuha. Like, that's just not...
No,
you know,
that ain't
Yuha is going to end multiple layers of reality. You know what I mean? And Kakashi watched Kaguya, you know, swap realms, and he's like, this is a deity. Like, I can't, you know, so it's just totally different ballpark.
No, it's a good reference because we have like a general idea of what that Kakashi could do in the War Arc. Like, we know that, you know, he's obviously intimidated by a multiple-tailed beast that aren't planetary. You know, it's very cut and dry that the Nine Tails with certain data book statements is referred to as like this you know, world-destroying sort of entity to an extent, very, very much up to interpretation. But the 10 Tails, is definitely like that's what makes that so special, is that it is like this planetary chakra level being, and it's got some other wake statements, but for the sake of like being more modest with it, it's definitely like a planetary threat. And him and my guy are like, yo, this is crazy when all the tail beasts are loading up their tail beast bombs about to shoot it at them. So we know like in terms of speed, Kakashi is very impressive. We know in terms of attack potency and destructive capability that he could tank. We know that just based on that alone, that specific Kakashi, not DMS and all the other stuff, just specifically that Kakashi, if that's the one that Gege means, wouldn't actually scale to the versions of Aizen we've explained, and that's just like a connected scaling via the author itself.
That's interesting. Okay, that's a cool approach.
I guess another point to make in regards to JJK's impressive stuff is that Gojo's brain does perceive things pretty much like infinitely in terms of speed. So his reaction time is pretty good.
Yeah,
he seems to be able to teleport mid-combat very passively, just whenever he wants. Aizen does have something similar to that, and that is that you can pretty much cast Kitos without incantation if you want to, but when it comes to power-type Kitos, if you say the names of the attack and the full incantation, it'll be more powerful. Now, there are teleporting Keto that can be whipped out in combat or just whipped out in general, which Gin, Tosin, and Aizen use to go to Sokyoku Hill. Now, Aizen's brain not only is just so much faster than a lot of the other Shinigami that could use this, but he seems to be able to teleport and reform with the Hogyoku in a weaker state than he currently is. And based upon the way that characters like Yuha fight with, precog type speed timing and Ichigo later on in the story, like in terms of speed too, he just wouldn't be able to touch Aizen. I think Aizen's just superior in that regard. So even with that like more higher interpretation of Gojo's speed, it wouldn't really make much of a difference in that regard too. But that is something people do skim over, is that
you'd have to argue, like, at best you'd say Gojo's like this inaccessible being who can move so fast that even without time you could still move around, and then maybe you'd argue that like for Aizen that's a lot more difficult to deal with. Only problem with that is that even if Gojo did have some type of inaccessible speed, or Sukuna for that matter, they'd be the only characters who could really objectively scale to that. But because Kashima's fighting with electromagnetic phenomenon, which is just light speed, so even if Gojo and Sukuna are these inaccessible beings, they couldn't actually defeat Aizen even then. Aizen could also basically life wipe the planet. If you want to go like psycho, give him a GameCube controller, let me control Aizen in this video game mode. Like, they can't actually do anything to him. At best, you would argue that Infinite Void would fry Aizen's brain. But I'm gonna play this card like I'm playing poker. I think that Aizen kind of has like a Majin Buu thing. I think if you can literally blow up Aizen's head and the Hogyoku's going to reform him.
Yeah, it's just going to rebuild it.
Like Majin Buu. We literally see him get eradicated from existence with the Hogyoku.
And he just comes back.
So that Aizen, he can literally not have a brain and come back and just be normal. So
crazy.
I think a fried brain, the Hogyoku's like, let me just fix your brain. And then that's it. So I think even if you were to argue Gojo had infinite speed, he was like a starbuster, I think even then, like, I think Aizen could still probably just pull it off. I think Gojo and Sukuna would just be confused about where he is. Aizen could just do some attacks that just warp time-space and destroy probably massive portions of their planet and erase them from existence if he wants to go Kid Buu mode. It depends, like, how desperate he gets, but this is just, like, hypothetically speaking, like, really fan-winked. Clearly not author-intended Gojo, unless you want to go with, like, the Mach 3 to infinite statement. But even if you give Gojo this infinite speed, it feels like even then it's like you'd have to have more like an infinite speed Kenjaku or like some type of infinite speed forming prison seal box, and then argue Aizen would just be frozen in the prison seal or something. But that's just like really bizarre, just headcanony, not implied things. That's really all my brain.
Yeah, Aizen would also he'd have no mental bias to want to like concede to these two, because
not at all.
If he sees them as a threat. Yeah, the same way he would view the Gosei 13 is probably how he would view those two individuals fighting him at once, and you could throw Kenjaku and Maki and everybody else all fighting him at the same time, and he would just have no mental bias to concede to them, mentally, where he would just be like, well, I've been defeated.
Maki's soul split katana, or split souls katana, and all those attacks they have, that's literally just a bad Zanpakuto. Like, the way it's described, it's just a bad Zanpakuto, the split soul katana.
Yeah, I mean... Even Ulquiorra, when he goes above the canopy, he does some sort of like spatial cutting slash to get above it. Like, that's how they break through the canopy itself, and it's it's very clear that like whenever these characters slash each other, they're attacking the soul. They they cut space and time with their blades.
They
So
basically
it's
all just have super split soul katanas. They all just have one.
Yeah.
It's just better. All their swords are just better than Maki's. Damn.
Yeah.
So pretty much like, we got Aizen cutting on a astral plane, if you want to word it like that. He can reject phenomena just from like extending his hand and just like slapping them with his spiritual pressure. That would just be, I mean, we know that he can do that anyway with the erasure stuff, with the transcendent capability and so on. But just generally speaking, like there's a lot more passive, really OP nonsense going on in Bleach that people don't pay attention to. It's not about like who slashes faster and who hits harder. It's like they're doing some very particular things a lot of the time in combat without people realizing. So I think just him going there.
I just thought of a win con for Aizen, as well, and that's, does Transcendent Aizen have more spiritual pressure than Yamamoto? It's like, yes. Well, Yamamoto's heat from his spiritual pressure, which is basically like putting the sun on Earth or sun on the planet and cooking it. It's actually just because his spiritual pressure is so intense that it generates heat, but it's not actually heat because heat doesn't function that way, right? So like Yamamoto, his spiritual pressure engulfs the planet. It engulfs this entire realm, and then it's going to turn into ashes. So Transcendent Aizen, if he's just like, you know what, these guys, like they're too fast, he's just going to engulf their planet in his spiritual pressure, and then it'll just eventually turn into ashes, and he wins by default. He could literally just like turn off the inhibitor. He could just like take off the inhibitor, like, all right, I'm done with this. And they would all just disintegrate. He doesn't even need to actually touch them. You'd have to argue Gojo and Sukuna would like fly into space like Beerus or something, like to avoid it. Like, even then it might not work. So it's like Aizen could just win with just existing,
Just being there. Wow.
Even with his even when he's restricted to the chair, he tries to shoot like a spiritual pressure blast upwards, and that's like it's pretty crazy because he sort of is restricted to a certain vicinity, but he fires off an attack and he's like, I'm just going to shoot down the soul palace.
Yeah, like that was crazy. Like, what the fuck?
What the when did you get that technique? Yeah. Like, you could just do that with them too. You could fire like an AoE, like spiritual pressure purple blast, and it would just kill them. Like, they would vanish.
There.
Even if they were to seal him in like the prison realm, hypothetically for the sake of a fun conversation, like he can open up the Senkaimon. It's basically just him lifting his blade and turning it like a key, which would open up a doorway to leave. If he wants to, he could just break out of it with spiritual pressure.
The only way that he gets trapped in that box is if like Gojo really is just so fast he can move in there, and it's not that whoever's in there can still move, right? But even then, you might be able to argue because Aizen warps time and space with his ability, he might also have a similar time-space warping existence that could move in the box. It does seem as though like he can negate beings that seem to govern reason as well. So it's like, could he still move in there? Maybe. Like it's still possible if he can warp time and space, then maybe he could. But
here's the thing: he would gain the ability to anyway, because he'd be sitting in there and he'd be like, "Yo, Hogyoku, help me out," and he'd just adapt to the technique. Like he'd overpower the realm anyway eventually. So it's pretty wild. Like he's just like, honestly, Maharaga on steroids. Then whatever else like on top of it. He's got so many techniques he can whip out. He's got like 99 different Kitos he can pull out, which includes stuff like time stop. Existence erasing, blast, barriers, sealing. Like, I mean, he could seal them if he wanted to, which is crazy. He knows how to do those Kitos too pretty well. There are faster than light, like Rikujokuro is an example. Like, he could flick that out and keep them in place.
Here's something I just thought about for Infinite Void as well. So how Infinite Void, you get put into a box and then like you get injected with information. Aizen's very existence, his very being, is the excess of his energy, his spirit that comes out of his body. But his existence can erase things from existence. Like, it can warp through time and space and just negate things that can. So it gets to the point where I wonder if information could even travel to him if he didn't want it to.
Ooh.
Like, would his existence
Jesus
itself be a
Christ.
barrier for information, right? Like, it's sort of like arguing, like, can light overpower Aizen's aura? And it's like, only if he lets it, realistically.
If he
speaking,
wills
only if
it,
his
yeah.
aura can cut through time space. So if there's no time and space, there's no information that can travel to him. So his aura would overpower this domain, and he'd almost have like a weird type of he'd almost have a weird type of simple domain, in a sense where he would almost have a resistance because of his own aura being a barrier that would just negate this information if he so wishes it, right? So if you control him and you're like, yes, put it on overdrive, I don't want you being hit by this attack or whatever, like we're controlling him, like whatever. That's still also a potentiality.
It travels through cursed energy, at least to some extent. It needs some means of travel. If you want to say it's light-based, that includes, photons and whatever, that can clearly be negated / destroyed by Aizen, so it's pretty valid. I think, this was pretty much us just sitting here and jerking Aizen's balls over.
Pretty much, but
I guess if
when you actually think about it, there is nothing that JJK can do to Aizen. He is absolutely ridiculously strong. It's unreal.
Needs a reference
podcast style.
If anyone needs a reference video, a little thesis on what Aizen does when he gets thrown into JJK, I mean, it's
there it is.
Cut and dry.
This is it.
I guess. Do we have any solid counter arguments for JJK to give them at least some credit? I mean,
something.
We kind of
give
go
them
through
something.
The most wank stuff. Does the world / have anything? It's got that crazy weird universal thing, but
no, even if it chopped through the universe, he just regenerates. Even if it worked on him. That's why I said earlier. Even if Hollow Purple and the world / worked on him,
doesn't matter.
It doesn't
it's unreal.
The fastest speed feeds too we have, so we could run through them real quick just to keep them in the video, right? We have borderline instant teleportation from Gojo. His brain can perceive infinite information, etc. That's probably the best one. We have Sukuna avoiding what people would say is either an aim dodge or a actual FTL feat, but that was shown to be something which is meant to be really impressive for the verse, so that's a higher end thing. Maki has downplayed with that crazy Mach 3 statement, which I don't agree with, by the way, because of Gege's author statement where he does follow up and say he doesn't agree with it. But there's also lightning stuff too, which is meant to be visually shown as impressive.
I think at best you would argue Sukuna and Gojo, they do this Naruto, but they do this Goku and Vegeta tag team attack where it's a world / Hollow Purple, and then you argue because Aizen is so slow and that it just Duranegs him, that he kind of has a post Mugetsu moment where he's vulnerable while he's powering up or regenerating, and then Kenjaku's hello, and he puts him in the box or something, and then you'd argue in the box, he can't move because there's no time, and you just argue Gojo's infinitely fast. That's sort of the kind of line of reasoning you'd have to go down, but it's just so unrealistic. So there is a way for him to win, but it's just sort of
so convoluted.
It's really, really not the likely scenario.
Not at all. It's if Doctor Strange ran the numbers, he's this happens once in 7 billion years. It just,
Yeah.
The thing is this, final thing I'll say, right? So for the sake of visualization, when Yamamoto basically got into his fighting stance and beat the out of Wonder Wise, Aizen would never do this because it's not how he fights. He's a little bit more eloquent with the way he does things, but if he actually wanted to, he'd just cast Kyokusoi and go over there and box their heads off, and he actually could do it too. That's how fast and physically strong he is. He would just go bang, right hand, head explodes, left hand on Sukuna, he's dead. It'd just be that simple.
Yep. Even that, he could just do a pimp smack, and it would you know that one scene where Meruem pimp smacks the little officer ant, and he his head explodes.
Yeah.
It's pretty much what would happen.
Unreal.
His aura would just erase them from existence, when he slaps
we
them.
saw something like that with Dongai Ichiro. He actually backhanded a black hole. If you think about it, he just smacked the fucking Kurohisa.
Yeah, he used his hands.
No, that's literally Ichigo just backhands an attack that warps space, right? So it's that's what Aizen would do. He just smack them and erase them from existence. Realistically speaking, that's what he could do. But yeah, that was there. That was a long 1 hour rant. We actually wanted this to be 20 minutes, but I hope you guys enjoyed this. It was fun just to kind of rant, kind of get into it. At first, I was kind of I was struggling to do the whole collab podcast style I used to do in 2017, but I actually started to really enjoy it again. So thank you for joining me, Clyde.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. This was very fun. I think if you've listened this far through the video, expect more like this. It pretty much is just, let's be real, it's kind of just like a power scaling podcast kind of video. But we're also going to use this as a way to cover for the Aizen McDonald's video, because we wanted to give you guys that collab. But let's be real, there isn't a lot to say. So this is far more in depth than that. So hopefully this gives you guys way more substance.
I mean, hey. we could do a little bit of a bonus, like.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you think would happen if Aizen went to McDonald's?
Yeah, true. We're not opposed to it, but I feel like
What?
as a substitute, this is like 3 videos in one. So
Yeah.
enjoy.
I'll give you guys a 2-minute rant about Aizen
Yeah,
McDonald's.
may
He
as
goes
well.
to McDonald's.
What? I don't understand this.
He has like 8 trillion IQ, okay? Based on how he is, he wants to change the world around him, okay? So he'd want to change how McDonald's is run. He's like, McDonald's is unhealthy. How could you like be
RFK.
so corrupted and overrun by money? So he's like, I need to climb the ranks, right? And now if he has the Hogyoku, he's like manifesting his will. His will is to rise the ranks. So he starts from cashier, working the drive-through. And the Hogyoku's manifesting all his attention from his boss. His boss is like, I love this guy. Suddenly the boss has the urge to quit. Aizen's like gaslighting him, like, man, you deserve better than this job.
Oh
He
my
manipulates his way to become manager of the joint. Works his way up into
This is
management,
genius.
goes up the chain, and eventually he makes McDonald's healthier for all. He makes it so McChickens aren't worth $5 anymore.
Or $8 over here.
Made out of real, yeah, and that's what would happen to McDonald's. Well, if Aizen worked at McDonald's, he'd work the chain, use his Hogyoku to manifest, work it up the chain,
Unreal.
make it healthier, probably make it cheaper, make it somehow more beneficial.
Oh
He
my
might,
God,
honestly, he'd
I
probably
love
try to
it.
turn McDonald's more into like some type of corporate conglomerate, like that monopolizes other things. Maybe more like a Disney type thing. I think that's
You know
what
how
he'd
there
do.
are
But
filler episodes like this in anime? Like, there's the Itachi cooking breakfast one. Like,
Oh, that's so good.
You see it in like Gintama all the time. Like, imagine this setting. It's like it's instead of a beach episode, it's them working at like, I don't know, we'll call it Mixed Soul Society, something like that.
Mixed Soul
And,
Society.
yeah.
Yamamoto is the store owner. He's the old head that like has just been running this shit for the past like 3,000 years the same way. Aizen is manipulating Momo into doing all of his shifts while they're under Kyokusei.
and then Squad Zero is like the CEO. Like,
yeah, they come to see if it's in order
actual
every
corporate.
now and then.
yeah.
All the different. It'd be so silly. He's got Momo like working the other fries. He's not even moving out of his chair. He's just got everybody under Kyokusei. He's talking to him about the most optimal way to make profit, and then he's using the Hogyoku to summon the actual Krabby Patty. Like that's now a part of the menu just out of nowhere because he can do that.
Yeah.
I guess there would be
Yeah.
some funny things that could be done if that was a filler episode. Like I've seen some slice of life anime where they've like shown off, Japan's version of like KFC and McDonald's, and they're like wholesome little.
Well,
moments.
tell us
I
part
consider
time
it
it.
a very funny Bleach filler episode. Like, I'm not someone that is like pro filler at all, especially with the old anime. It would have definitely did a lot better if the Bout arc didn't exist. But if they ever did something like that for the current Bleach anime, just for a little fun thing, like I can see
That
it
came in
being
at the
a
wrong
funny
time
way.
as well.
Yep. Well, hope you guys enjoyed Aizen and JJK and Aizen at McDonald's. But other than that, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to subscribe to Clyde. There's a bunch of Bleach videos coming out soon, especially on Yuha and some others. And
Not just
I
that,
have some-
boys. You got to get the video to 1,000 likes if you want more of these. Click the like button. Subscribe to this channel. We'll do more.
All right, guys. Hope you guys have a good one. See you later.
That was amazing. I was not expecting that Aizen versus McDonald's at the end. That's great. It's so cool that they still do videos together after all that drama-y stuff, which we don't need to talk about anymore. That's cool. But that was really interesting. Aizen does absolutely destroy JJK. I love the cross-reference with Naruto as well. And then you put Kakashi in there as well. And it's like, okay, cool. So, yeah, awesome stuff. Thanks for watching.